College students tend to get stressed out by finals, but if you attend the University of Utah, you have an option. It's called the Cry Closet. The closet is a creation of an art student called Nemo Miller, and it exists for stressed out students who can step into it for up to 10 minutes of crying to help cope with the tests. The closet interior includes fuzzy stuffed animals for maximum coping. The question is it time to go national with this? Weeping wardrobes erected across this fragile country. Only one woman can make the case for that, and she is, of course, Kathy Aru, the founding publisher of Catalina Magazine and our liberal Sherpa. Kathy, it's great to see you tonight.
Hey, good to see you.
At first glance, it seems a little confusing because college, of course, is the least stressful place there is. I mean, it's already a yoga ritual. Well, sure. I mean, you go to class for 2 hours a week and get drunk the rest of the time.
Oh, come on. That's
Why
not
are college
everyone's
students
experience.
crying?
No, it's very stressful. They're learning. They're the future. These are citizens of tomorrow. And they're learning as much as they can. They're as stressed as can be, so they need psychological health. They need this bioenergetic way to get out their stress. They need 10 minutes of a good cry and a cry closet to then be prepared to take those exams from everything they've learned in those classes. So,
we don't have time for you to define bioenergetic on the show, so I'm going to let that pass, but I'm going to email you later.
Thank you.
But does this suggest something maybe about the fragility of their mental health? I mean, if you're so stressed about taking some dumb test at some dumb school, doesn't that mean that you're kind of on the edge of a breakdown?
Well, no. Don't we all need a good old-fashioned cry? This is all it's saying. This is an old-fashioned remedy to a modern-day problem. It's just about crying, 10 minutes of crying. Everyone needs a stress ball. Many people own stress balls, so this is just an interpretation of a giant stress ball.
So let's say we had a war. Let's say, I don't know, pick a country, China, challenged us in some way where we had to mobilize a large number of Americans to defend the homeland.
Okay.
But everyone's crying. Would anybody be left to fight the war? I mean, can you really defend a country if you're encouraging kids to cry about final exams?
Well, this is about psychological health. So if everyone takes a moment aside to just center themselves, ground themselves, have a cry maybe for 2-3 minutes, and then go fight that war, I'm sure the war would be won.
How do you say that some people don't have privilege when you basically just said that trans people aren't valid? They're not a thing. They're just girls pretending to be boys or boys pretending to be girls.
Okay.
Oh,
someone's excited. Okay.
Biological, but gender is a completely different thing.
No, gender is not disconnected from sex. So.
It's not completely disconnected, but it's still a cultural thing. It's still from society. It's
okay. No, it is not in the mind. Okay, you're not a man if you think you're a man. And I didn't say pretending, or if I did, I shouldn't have said pretending. Let me amend.
You said playing.
Okay, I said a boy who thinks he's a girl. That's the usual phraseology I use. Not playing. I usually say a boy who thinks he's a girl or a girl who thinks he's a boy, which is technically what we're talking about here. The idea that sex or gender are malleable is not true. Okay, and I'm not denying your humanity if you're a transgender person. I am saying that you are not the sex to which you claim to be. But if you are going to dictate to me that I'm supposed to pretend that men are women and women are men, no. My answer is no. I'm not going to modify basic biology because it threatens your subjective sense of what you are.
Okay, but you're still saying these kids should not be accepted because they don't really fit in either place? They can't just
I'm saying that the Boy Scouts have a standard. You must be a biological boy to be a Boy Scout. You have to be a boy to be a Boy Scout.
Where's that written though? Okay.
In the name Boy Scouts.
Got him!
Because this is a very because for all of human history, boy meant boy and girl meant girl.
Have you talked to a group of trans people at all instead of this group of white people?
I'm more than happy to talk to a group of any people who will have me, but usually they protest me.
Okay, last question about your Planned Parenthood thing. So why do you think it's not about controlling women's bodies and just about the separate life? After the baby is born, how come more people don't care about them? They don't care where they end up in foster care. They don't care about the mother being poor.
Okay, I do care about the mother being poor. I do care about foster care.
Okay, but why don't you advocate for that, though? Because
for what?
Planned Parenthood is supposed to prevent abortions.
Because, Planned Parenthood doesn't prevent abortions. They perform hundreds of thousands of abortions a year. They perform 300,000 abortions a year. They're the leading abortion mill in the United States.
Evidence for that, though?
That they perform 300,000 abortions a year from Planned Parenthood. That's my evidence. They don't dispute that. No one disputes that.
Birth control and cancer.
I'm not anti-birth control.
I No,
Birth control is extraordinarily cheap.
That provides affordable birth control, which would in turn.
Okay, they're not the only people in America who provide affordable birth control. You can go get a pack of condoms down at the local CVS for $12.
Condoms great. People need medication too.
Yes, and it's true that most forms of birth control are also extraordinarily cheap on an annualized basis, unless you have a severe problem. And I'm not against people going and getting that from Planned Parenthood. As you may have noticed, I'm mostly against abortion. If you want to go to Planned Parenthood and get a contraceptive, go for it. I don't care. I do care when you start killing babies. This is a problem for me.
I want to know, what is your answer to young people for some of the really big problems facing humanity, like the climate catastrophe, like economic crisis, like the precarious job market? Because they just don't, like, you talk all this much about individual responsibility. Most of us are never going to be able to afford to have all of these assets to have responsibility over. So what is your advice beyond banal comments like clean your room?
Well, it's actually rather difficult to answer a question that ends with your comments are banal, politely. So, I would consider that more of an opinionated personal and political statement than actually a question. So why don't you try reformulating that so that there's an actual question there?
What is your So what is your advice to young people when you talk about you need to be individually responsible, but when there are things that are so far out of our control, like climate catastrophe, like the precarious job economy, like the economic crisis?
Out of your control as you think.
What is your answer to
Do you think that you're worse off than
questions?
you're worse off than your grandparents?
I think there are different challenges.
Do you think you're worse off than your grandparents?
I think that
Jordan, once again, we're not going to cross-examine our questioners. So try answering the question about collective responsibility on climate change, for example. Pick one part of that, because the argument, I think, is that individual responsibility does not change the climate, does not fix the problem that needs global collective responsibility. So I think that's the core of the question. Do you have a theory about that?
Well, fundamentally, I'm a psychologist, and my experience has been that people can do a tremendous amount of good for themselves and for the people who are immediately around them by looking to their own inadequacies and their own flaws and the things that they're not doing in their lives and starting to build themselves up as more powerful individuals. And if they're capable of doing that, then they're capable of expanding their career. And if they're capable of expanding their career and their competence, then they're capable of taking their place in the community as effective leaders. And then they're capable of making wise decisions instead of unwise decisions when it comes to making collective political decisions. I'm not suggesting in the least, and have never suggested, that there's no domain for social action. I'm suggesting that people who don't have their own houses in order should be very careful before they go about reorganizing the world, which happens in many ways.
So, can I just if a young person believes that the climate, the global warming problem on the climate is something that needs to be tackled quickly, and they can't wait until they grow up and become prime ministers to do it, do you think collective responsibility overrides individual responsibility in a huge issue like that?
No.
Okay.
I don't. Okay. I think generally people have things that are more within their personal purview that are more difficult to deal with and that they're avoiding, and that generally the way they avoid them is by adopting pseudo-moralistic stances on large-scale social issues so that they look good to their friends and their neighbors. That's what it looks like.
You own a pencil factory. I'm a worker in that pencil factory. you can have all the machinery, you can buy all the raw materials you want, but without me, and presumably many others like me, to assemble the pencils, all you would have is a pile of wood, yellow paint, graphite, rubber, and aluminum.
Okay.
That would be worth, and that is worth less than the pencil when you try and sell it. And yet, all of that value added by labor, apart from the wages that you give me, which if we're being honest, there is a major power imbalance in our ability to negotiate that.
If all that putting the pencil together requires is basic use of your prefrontal cortex, then yes, your labor is alienable at lower rates than if you are a doctor. That's not the fault of the person who owns the machinery.
But if you didn't have workers like me and your pencil factory, and you were just one man.
But I do. I have millions of people who are willing to do that voluntarily for me.
If you're just one person trying to assemble pencils, you're not going to get very far. You need workers. Capital needs labor infinitely more than labor needs capital. That's why you have worker cooperatives where the workers are the ones...
I fundamentally disagree on the distinction between capital and labor. Capital is just a term for money. If you're talking about money, money does not grow from the ground. Money only has value because it was traded for labor at one point or the products of labor. So if I take my money and I buy machinery, I have invested my labor in doing that because I didn't get the money from nowhere. Even if I got it from my parents didn't get the money from nowhere. The people who built the machines required me to trade something of value to them in order for me to obtain the machines. The people who invented the machines required people to pay them in order to get the patent to that machine so they could build the machine. The problem that I'm seeing in what you're saying is you have still failed. If what you're talking about is a system of voluntarism, you still have not named any area in which we disagree, and yet you're telling me that you're a socialist and I'm a free marketer. So one of us has got this wildly wrong, and I'm pretty sure it's not me.
The differentiation I draw, and I'm not alone in this, I'm not one person trying to redefine anything. The differentiation I and many others like me draw between socialism and capitalism is that under capitalism, when you as the owner of the factory, you give me a wage. The wage could be $7.25, it could be $15, it could be whatever an hour, right? But you give me a wage. All the additional profit above made from selling the pencils or whatever good you produce above what is reinvested into the company ultimately goes to you or the investors, those who own shares in the means of production.
Right.
Under socialism, those people are the workers, and the example I give, again, is cooperative enterprise.
No, those are the people who are investing the risk. So if they carry the risk, then they get the benefit. The owner of the factory carries the risk, therefore he gets the benefit. The workers in the company you mentioned, if that company were to go bankrupt, they would carry the risk as well as the benefit. If the company goes bankrupt, and this guy has to pay off all of his debts, the worker may lose his job, but he's not the one who's going to incur the debt of having gone bankrupt. If you incur risk, then you're the one who pays the downside. The worker does not pay the downside. Okay, it is the investor who pays the downside, who invested in all the machinery, who sunk millions of dollars into making your labor productive. Because guess what? Your labor is without that machinery. Gunk. Nothing. You don't have a pencil to put together. You don't got the wood. You don't got the paint. You don't got the rubber. You don't got the metal. You got nothing. Right? You're sitting there, standing outside, twiddling your thumbs. It required somebody to invest. Who do you think put more in? The guy who spent millions of dollars buying all the machinery, leasing the place, making sure there was a management structure, doing the LLC formation, making sure all the tax code was in compliance, or you standing outside because you can stick a piece of graphite into a piece of wood? Now we're done.
Come da porca picchita va bene, si tu la parla miezza americano, quando si fa l'amore sotto la luna, come da bene in capo di I love you, papà l'americano.